SC84.
Well, it's good to see everybody again. We are on page 50 of the Regional Study Guide. We're still working through map number 4, the SCA Southern and Central Arenas. We're on number 9, the Wilderness of Ziph. Which just sounds like a fun name to me. So, Ziph. So let's begin with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Just guide and bless our study. Lord, we're excited. We're less than a month away. A month from today, we'll be in Israel. Walking in amongst these very places that we've been studying. So just guide our preparation, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that we are ready to experience this great and awesome opportunity. We just ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Ziph sounds like something that used to grow on my face when I was a teenager.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. So it's not possible, as you see there on number 9, it's not possible to pinpoint the location of David and his men during this period. The wilderness of Ziph is somewhere east of the city of Ziph, an area today which is the home of various Bedouin tribes. The men of Ziph, although from Judah, may have recalled Saul's campaign against the Amalekites and the force which accompanied him on the expedition in 1 Samuel 15. Saul had erected a monument at a nearby town of Carmel. It has served as a reminder to the inhabitants of southern Judah of the deliverance Saul had provided. Either out of respect or out of fear, the men of Ziph informed Saul of David's whereabouts. David had to move again, this time farther east into the Badlands above the Dead Sea, an area the Bible calls the Jeshimon. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it, but it sounded good, right?
Yeah.
All right. Unlike other areas in the wilderness, the shepherd and his herds do not frequent this rough and dangerous region. In spite of the challenges of the terrain, Saul finally cornered David and his men. Only a Philistine raid, perhaps again in the Shephelah, diverted Saul and saved David. Saul returned to his duties as king, for to do no such Philistine actions was politically dangerous for the first king of Israel. The mention of the raid reminds us of the continual Philistine threat from the west of Judah. So we had number 9 over in this region here. So we put a number 9 just where we think the wilderness of Ziph is. So just to the right of the center in the bottom half, just to the right of center, we'd already put a number 9. Have we put a number 9 there yet?
No.
Okay. So we're gonna.
Close to Carmel. I found that.
It's about an inch northeast of Carmel.
Say,
About an inch northeast of Carmel.
So I can't remember what we marked and what we haven't marked.
East.
It has written
Oh,
on
it
Wilderness of
is
Ziph.
there. There it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just put a 9 there?
Yeah.
It said it.
It
Somebody
says
said it wasn't
Wilderness
on
of
there.
Ziph.
Ziph is on there.
Yeah,
Ziph.
it is.
And so we're going to the right of that.
We won't get to be Ziffy this trip.
Yeah, we probably will not go down that way.
Inch northeast of Carmel.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
There's a reason they call it a wilderness.
Yeah.
Do you know how long it took me to find the hill? Because it's written in a really.
And so, yeah. All right. So Ziph is, if you go just to the west of the number 9 and a little bit north. So north of, so you had found Carmel there earlier? Just go north about an inch is where Ziph is.
It's an inch.
It's an inch south. It's an inch southwest of Ziph.
Are we talking circular enough for everyone? Yeah, so right near the seam.
I have a
I
9,
like that. That's
probably
good,
the
Al.
wrong spot, but I got a 9 near
Okay.
Ziph.
Yeah, great. And I can't remember, did we put the 10 on, did we put these numbers on? or not?
No, we stopped at 8.
Okay,
I know because I did
Okay.
it Monday.
so good. So 10 is En-Gedi. So let's find it first now. Let's find that first for us. So if you go on the shore of the Dead Sea, so if you get where this little jut comes across, go north about 4 or 5 inches, you'll see En-Gedi sticking out into the water. So just to the north of En-Gedi Springs there, write green number 10. So just north of the En-Gedi and En-Gedi Springs, put a number 10. And we will, the plan is for us to go to En-Gedi. This is a place where we just gotta see the tip of it. It was wet that day, so the higher up parts of the springs were closed off to us because the hiking was dangerous. So I'm hoping we can explore a little bit more the springs of En-Gedi. And so this is now getting to the point where David would have brought flocks and herds, could have brought them down into this area as a shepherd. So we'll talk about that. So,
Is that why they've got David's Canyon on there?
yeah. And this is one of the places where David fled from Saul. David, this was kind of his territory.
So this is after he was anointed, but before he was king.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so as we're talking about in Ziph, he kind of hung out in Ziph, and the people of Ziph, you know, they either remembered Saul's victory, or were being loyal to the king, or whatever, or didn't like David, thought he looked funny. Who knows? For whatever reason, they told Saul, David's in our area. And Saul came down. That's what number 9 was about. Saul came down to that area, and only the Philistines coming in over here pulled Saul and his men away from David. So number 10, we're at En-Gedi. This is on the western shore of the Dead Sea. It's talked about in 1 Samuel 24. The most beautiful, refreshing, I can talk this morning, place along the dry and inhospitable western shore of the Dead Sea is En-Gedi. Springs in a number of places provide fresh water, and greenery and interesting sorts flourish in the warm climate. Just north of En-Gedi is a good-sized spring which gushes forth in a small canyon known today as David's Canyon. Indeed, David and his men may have retired to this canyon and its springs after barely escaping Saul's troops. Just south of En-Gedi, the great Argut Canyon, with its own spring-fed streams, emerges from the wilderness. Its walls rise some 600 meters, 1,900 feet, on one summit above En-Gedi. Ancient fortresses guarded this back door to Judah. From them, one could survey the entire Dead Sea. The Aragut Canyon divides the wilderness east of Bethlehem from the wilderness of Ziph and Moan. Running just north of this major canyon is a natural route from Bethlehem and Tekoa to En-Gedi. When Saul returned from his defensive operation against the Philistines and heard that David was in En-Gedi, he chose an elite corps of men and headed for En-Gedi. He no doubt descended via Tekoa, the same route along which David may have led his elderly father Jesse when they escaped to Moab. On the way, Saul would have passed near Bethlehem, David's hometown. He felt that this time he would rid Judah of David. The action-packed episode along the cliffs and rugged terrain of En-Gedi, however, clearly showed the respect and concern David had for King Saul. All right, so this is that's where we're talking about. You can see kind of the canyon that runs all the way up. You see Tekoa. Maybe you don't see that. So we all find where Jerusalem is,
Yes.
right? So you go to the top of the Dead Sea and you go towards the Mediterranean Sea. You can find Jerusalem. You go south of Jerusalem. On the road there, you see Bethlehem. It's about an inch and a half south of Bethlehem on the road. And then if you go about the same distance south on that road, you get to Tekoa. And so that's where Saul would have passed that way and then taken probably that little windy road along the hills and in the valleys all the way to En-Gedi Springs. That is not the path we will take to get there. We'll go down kind of this more major east-west road from Jerusalem and then go along the shore of the Dead Sea when we go down there.
Highway 90.
Oh,
So, and it's interesting, the road that will go on the shore of the Dead Sea would have been underwater, was it 50 years ago, Tom? Just because the Dead Sea is shrinking.
yeah.
And they kind of have it marked of like, here's where the water line used to be. So, just some interesting things. So, in this account, if you remember, just in 1 Samuel 24, we're not going to read it, but I just want to reference it for you. If you remember, David had opportunities to get Saul on a number of occasions where the Lord delivered Saul into David's hand, but David does not act against him. You remember some of those accounts and stories? It's here at En-Gedi, though, that Saul camps, and Saul needs to go in and relieve himself. He needs to go to the bathroom. So Saul goes into this cave, and it happens to be the very cave where David and his men are hiding. And so while Saul is taking care of his business, David sneaks up and cuts a corner of Saul's cloak off. His men tell him, kill him. God's given him to you, kill him. David's like, I'm not going to harm the Lord's anointed. Saul goes out of the cave, goes a little distance. David comes out and calls out to Saul, my Lord, who are you looking for that you're hunting after him with like thieves and clubs and those kinds of things? Come on in, Richard. Yeah. And so that's and Saul and David says, look at your robe. I could have harmed you, but I didn't. Those people that are telling you I'm your enemy are wrong. Really, it's Saul that's saying and Saul repents of that and stops chasing David then after that for a little bit. And then he gets back to it again. So that's what that episode is. And then we number 11. We have the green number 7 down south of En-Gedi. There's the stronghold Masada. 11 is in the same place, so you can put the 11 by 7. So down here, so En-Gedi goes south, and you'll run into Masada, the stronghold. We talked about that in number 7. We see it again.
Oh, so just put 11 right.
Put 11 right next to the 7. Yeah. Leaving En-Gedi, David and his men headed south. We're on page 50, Richard, when you get there. So headed south and again climbed the stronghold, the region's most secure site. The combination of the massive cliffs and the deeply eroded canyons by which he and his men passed must have left lasting impression upon David's sensitive spirit. The striking view of the steep Transjordanian slopes and the thought of challenges which faced him may have made young David recall Joshua's early days of leading Israel and the impossible odds against him. It is not surprising that Psalm 27 and 37 contain some of the same themes as Joshua 1, since both of these young men looked to the God of Israel, for courage and strength. This was especially true at this moment in David's life, for it seemed that when he was here, he received word that Samuel, his counselor and spiritual father of Israel, had died in Ramah. One wonders at Saul's reaction to the same news. So Psalm 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? So that's my confirmation verse. So I've got that. Alan calligraphied that, and it's hanging on my. Yeah, you did that in calligraphy for me a couple years ago, and it's hanging on my wall there. So it's a good reminder of that. When we think of stronghold, Masada was called the stronghold in David's day, and so he probably had this in mind: this natural fortified fortress, almost impenetrable, and then different generations fortified it in different ways. Finally, Herod the Great did the last and the greatest fortification there. And we'll, if everything goes well, we'll get to be there and see that, and it'll be just amazing to kind of think of that when David thinks of stronghold, what that means. All right. The wilderness of Paran and Maon. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that one very well. And so we're south of Ziph. There's a green 12. Do you have an elevation marker? You guys see that elevation marker there? 73, 2,207 feet. You guys see that in tiny letters? So south of your number 9, almost straight south of your number 9. Do you see an elevation marker there?
And there's right below that elevation marker, it says Wilderness of Moon.
Okay. Right there is where you want to put the 12, next to that elevation marker. Yeah.
Say the amount.
673 and 2,207 feet. So just south of number 9. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that 673 meters, 2,207
Right.
feet.
Right there.
Okay. Right here?
Yeah.
Oh, I see it now.
That's number, what number is that? Sorry.
12.
That's number 12. You guys have a few more elevation markers than mine. They gave you a little more information on the newer map, so. There's a couple different elevation markers there, but just that area. Yep. Yeah, and It's a wilderness, so it's not like it's a city. So as long as we're close, we're okay. Yeah.
Because it says wilderness.
Yeah.
It says it right above it.
So these really are desert areas. So when we think of deserts, it's not just sand, but when we think of deserts, it's the amount of rainfall. This area is getting less than probably 8 to 10 inches of rainfall a year. So it really is a wilderness, a desert area. 8 inches is what you need to be able to grow barley, and that's kind of it's the crop that needs the least amount of rainfall. And so it's right on the edge of being able to grow any kind of crop, the amount of rainfall that this area receives. It's in a rain shadow. It's on the other side of the ridge, coming downhill towards the Dead Sea.
Is that what they call God forsaken land?
I think so, yeah. So, I mean, they'd be enough for like scrub brush and other things like that you could, if you had a ranging cattle or ranging sheep or something, you could have some shepherding going on in these areas, but farming would be very difficult.
What's the ground like? Is it sand or?
It's rocky, rocky and craggy. You know, the different rocks, and then there's just brush growing out of the rocks and some of those kinds of things. And there's some soil, like in this area. In this area, it's very rocky. But you got all these mountains and hills and crevices and canyons and that are going in throughout all of these areas. So you see you can see the texture of the land on the map. That very much is like that, except the texture is the difference of hundreds of feet.
Yeah.
You know, just sometimes sharp, sometimes rolling. Yeah. All right.
And it's that way all the way down the coast of the Dead Sea.
It is.
It's like Pastor said, it's in the rain shadow, and they don't get, and so the only things that can live out there are some animals, scrub brush, and Bedouins who come out from under rocks to sell trinkets to tourists.
And there are springs like they're talking about, because the water and things, the rain will fall up in the hills and it goes down through the rocks, and then it will come out these underground springs or channels. So there are towns, because if you have water, you're able to have towns, but they're not necessarily they're settlements, maybe a better word, that these Bedouins would travel between, that are there. All right. So David and his men now moved into the area of herdsmen, because they're not going to be able to grow crops. So there's just herds that are moving from one place to another, near villages in the southern hill country of Judah. The location of the wilderness of Paran is somewhere east or southeast of Moan and Carmel. The book of Genesis locates another wilderness of Paran much farther south. Even today, Bedouin shepherds can be seen throughout this area with their herds of goats, whose teeth can seek out every blade of dry grass. The combination of herds and agricultural products listed in the chapter illustrates the region well. David's discipline over his men was such that they refrained from the normal practices of desert raiders and instead protected the farmers as well as the herdsmen of the region. The remark of Nabal, so clearly recording the effective use of words to dishonor one's family and discredit one's actions, almost brought a disastrous response from David. Abigail, who appears to have respected David's reign on his militia, acted quickly and saved the young leader from discrediting himself in the eyes of all Judah, particularly by Nabal's prominent clan of the Calebites from Hebron. Finally, this interesting episode in David's wanderings again shows that not all in Judah supported David. So in 1 Samuel 25, you may or may not remember that account, but he's in the wilderness, and this guy named Nabal is rich. He had, this Bible says he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. All right, so he's wealthy. Your wealth was not in banks. Your wealth was in animals. So he's very wealthy. And David comes up, and he sent men ahead, and instead of just taking things, he greets him and asks for, just basically just hospitality. David asked for hospitality. He's like, hey, we treated and respected your servants. We didn't harm them. We watched over them to make sure nobody else harmed them. And David's asking for hospitality. And Nabal dishonors David's messengers, and David And David's gonna like, well, fine, we'll just take what we want then. And Abigail, Nabal's wife, circumvents her husband and goes and provides David and basically calms his anger, and is there. And so provides for them, takes him food and everything else. She doesn't tell Nabal what she's doing. And so they meet. Eventually, Nabal dies, and Abigail becomes one of David's wives. So that happens later on in the story. So, yeah.
Way to a man's heart through his stomach.
Yeah, so there you have it. So
She did well for herself.
it said, and about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. So,
So does Abigail mean peacemaker? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I don't remember what her name means.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Had a lot of, Abigail seems to be a new popular name.
So that was that's that story. David had a wife already, if you remember. It was the daughter of Saul, who David got from one of the plots to get David was David wanted to marry Saul's daughter Michal or Michael, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Michal, and she loved him, and David was infatuated and loved her, and Saul said, okay, if you want to marry her, the bride price is 100 Philistine foreskins.
That can be tricky to.
So you can imagine that's not going to be volunteer. He's going to have to kill them first, right? So yeah. So and so basically, Saul's hoping that David's going to be killed in the process. David brings Saul 200. And Saul has no choice. He can't go back on his word, and so
Literally.
so again, David is politically speaking, he's now married to the king's daughter, which is a huge in. So when David's on the run, and his wife Michal, Saul's daughter, is not with him; she's in the palace. There's disagreement there, but Saul gives her to another man to be her husband because David's not there. Yeah. So David has two wives. Sorry, even though his first wife is not with him, has been given now to another man.
So did they get married?
Abigail and David, yeah.
But at that time, or was it later?
It's a month or two later, because it's another week or two when Nabal dies, and then it's a week, or Nabal gets sick, and a week later he dies, and then Abigail comes to David. Doesn't give the exact time, but comes to David
So
soon
she
after
marries
that.
another man while she's married to David. Is that what I'm?
No.
No, first one.
First wife.
Abigail's the second one.
Abigail's the second
Yeah,
one.
I understand that, but you said that Saul gave Abigail.
No.
to someone else.
Saul gave his daughter Michal, David's first wife, to another man.
Oh, so he never did marry.
No, he married her and then Saul divorced him.
Oh, okay, that, I missed a link. The
Well,
lawyer link.
Whether they officially divorced or not, Saul just gave her to another man to
Okay,
be her husband.
okay.
Is the first one, not Abigail.
Divorce was so easy in those days.
Yeah, just write a letter.
All right. So now we're number 12. David has been moved. We read that part, right? Yeah. 13. The wilderness of Ziph. We had this one already, right?
We had Ziph.
Oh, we put a 9. This is going to be a little bit different spot where we're going to put 13. You can see these wildernesses stretched it out. So we're going to, there's a 441, 140, 144, 7 by the pass across the Zelim Canyon. You're like, where are we talking about? So if you go to Masada, the stronghold, and then you're going to go left about an inch is where that 441, 1447. And I'll walk around, make sure you find that one. So just for those watching here, we're right here is where we're talking about.
Right above Masada, about an inch.
So
Just right above
Yep,
the-
that's exactly right.
So you say put a number there?
Right there, yeah,
13.
Okay.
Yeah, 13.
I need to.
We're finding it?
Yeah.
We're there. Good.
Mhm.
So David's all over this wilderness area, isn't he? And he's getting to know it well. Again, the men of Ziph reported David's whereabouts to Saul. In the wilderness in the Jeshimon and are the context of Saul's pursuit of David's escape. A dramatic conversation is recorded between Saul and David from either side of a deep canyon in the region, no doubt the Great Zelim Canyon. This time Saul appears convinced to give up his chase. At the end of the chapter, the two separate, never to meet again. There's a more precise discussion of the event in the region, a special map in the Geobasic Study Guide. That's the other book if you wanted to look at that. So this is in 1 Samuel 26. So David kind of has sent spies out to see if they've camped, if they've done that. And David he sneaks into Saul's camp. He brings one other man with him, sneaks into Saul's camp at night. And they're sleeping, they're not keeping good guard that's there. And the guy with David, one of his mighty men, a cousin or something like that, Abishai, he's like, we got it. Kill Saul and let's be done with this. Again, David says, I will not strike the Lord's anointed. I won't harm him. But David takes the spear and water jug of Saul. So next to Saul are laying his spear, right, his favorite weapon, and his favorite mug, right, favorite coffee mug. He takes them both and sneaks back out of the camp. When they're back out of the camp, he calls down to Abner and says, who's the commander of Saul's army, Abner, what are you doing? Don't you care about your master at all? Right? And kind of convinces Saul to give, it's like, Saul, again, I could have killed you. Look, I have your spear and your favorite coffee mug, right? I could have killed you, but I didn't. I am not your enemy. And this finally kind of convinces Saul, I think, to give up the chase. That, and there's also other attacks from the Philistines and other places that desire his attention. And so that's what happened in this area here. 14, Gath, near the green number 4. So we're going out of the wilderness. We're now going onto the coastal plain. I think, do we have Gath highlighted or circled?
No, just have 4.
We have a 4 next to it. So put a 14 next to there too. So David doesn't have to, Saul's not chasing anymore. Okay? So once the immediate threat from Saul has passed, David had second thoughts about staying in the wilderness. He had the choice of moving to Moab and the Transjordan where he had taken his family, or joining forces with the Philistines on the coastal plain. David must have given careful thought to this important decision. Although Moab straddled the Transjordanian highway, it was completely isolated from Judah and offered David little political opportunity. If escaping from Saul had been his only concern, he could have crossed over to Moab at any time during his flight. It is clear that David had more in mind than his daily security, so he appealed to Achish at Gath, who sent him to Ziklag. When Saul heard that David was in Gath, he no longer sought for him. So you got that. He's over here. At any point, he could have gone over to Moab. Moab's over here. He could have crossed over the Dead Sea, got on the other side. That was out of Saul's reach, unless he wanted to bring his whole army and completely destroy the Moabites. That's where David sent his family, because he wanted them to escape. But David knows he's the Lord's anointed. So he never abandons Judah. He never abandons this area. Now Saul's not pursuing him. He goes up to Gath, and he talks to the Philistine leader of Gath. And David kind of says, hey, I'm here. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so, hey, Saul's my enemy. He wants to kill me. Let's kind of make a peace. And so the Philistine leader in Gath says, all right, you can go down and you can kind of be the sheriff, the guy who watches over this area that we're going to talk about next. And so he kind of makes a peace with them. But what the Philistine leader thinks is happening is not actually what's happening. David's kind of playing him. And so when Saul learns that David's at Gath, he knows that he doesn't have the force to wipe out Gath. And so he doesn't pursue David anymore. So he kind of knows he's being protected that way. All right. So let's get Ziklag. This is in the western Negev. I think we have that highlighted, that we highlighted yesterday in the western Negev. Ziklag. So we're looking for that. It says it above the. It's if you Gerar is there near Gerar.
It's right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
I found it.
Found Ziklag. So this is in the western Negev. You can see the terrain is not nearly as rough as the Shvela or the wilderness, Judean wilderness, but it is it's very arid and dry in Ziklag. It's near the coastal plains. It's near one of the routes, couple of the routes for both coming. We highlighted that route the other day. It's near this route going down through the Negev and south of the Dead Sea towards the Transjordanian Highway, but it's also close to both branches of the coastal highway. So it's a politically, militarily, a strategic point where David's kind of the sheriff of this area, And so for the Philistines, that's a good thing. Like, hey, somebody's got our southern flank here. We got somebody that's looking out for our interests in that area. At least they think they do. Yeah. So this is that's Ziklag, and you can where David's at, and he kind of hangs out there and camps there. According to the probable location seen on the SCA map, which we just mapped, it's situated in the western Negev. The site stands on the edge of a small spring-fed stream bed which flows westward through the year as far as Gerar. Right, you have to have water to have a settlement. Right, so there's the water there. And in the rainy season, into the great Nahal Besor. Geographically, the region belongs to the Negev, an area of fine, wind-blown soil called Los, which covers most of the Negev basin. The region of Ziklag is quite different from the coastal plain to the north. Note the slightly higher and rolling area of brown, steep soil separating Ziklag from the Philistine alluvial plain, defined by the cities of Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. Ziklag has an elevation of about 168 meters versus the elevation on the Philistine alluvial plain of 50 meters. All right, so you're looking at it's higher in elevation. The soil's not as rich. It's more of rolling hills kind of thing that's there. Right. The question of the locations of Ziklag and Gath have received much attention. Events in 1 Samuel 27 figure prominently in the discussion. Some argue for Ziklag and Gath in close proximity, while others call for some distance between them. The SCA map adopts the interpretation that the distance is required. Two elements from the account support this. The king of Gath needed David to patrol his southern border. This requires some distance. Otherwise, Achish could have done the task himself. Two, David's tactics also required that he was to be separated from his Philistine master. From Ziklag, this location on the SCA map, David was able to report to Achish that he was policing the people of Judah in the southern hill country in the Negev, while in reality, he was moving against others in protecting Judah. Had Ziklag been close to Gath, Achish could have easily discovered the truth. It should be noted that the Hebrew term hayom, today, in 27:10 allows for a broader interpretation than a specific 24-hour period. Right, so yom can mean day, 24-hour period, but at times, depending on the context, it could mean more, is what they're saying. Or the hayom there. Glance over the SCA map and note where the action has taken place. So we see where the green numbers are, right? That's what it's talking about. The chapters you have read have taken you across vastly different geographical landscapes of the country, from the coastal highways and the valleys of the Shvela along high ridges and across the terraced farmland of the hill country, as well as deep into the refuges of the wilderness and along the shores of the Dead Sea, the lowest point on the face of the earth, to the high Moab table and beyond. They have also stretched from central Benjamin by Ephraim to the Negev in the south. These events, more than any others in the Bible, illustrate the area of Judah and the regions which surround it. All right, so we're going to highlight a few things. So we're going to highlight Gath. So we have Gath by the 4 and 14.
And I want to throw a little editorial comment
Yep.
there. It says that there's some dispute about the location of Ziklag and Gath. There's no dispute anymore about where Gath is located. That's where it is. They found the city about 20 years ago.
But there's still about Ziklag.
Yeah. And again, you look at this Ziklag, some of these towns, like Gath had definite structures in some of these things. Some of these towns could have been more like tent cities.
Nomadic.
So they were nomadic, so they may have set up these tents. We're not talking about like a thin little canvas thing. We're talking about tents with, skins that are, thick with fur on the outside of them. When they get wet, they expand and don't let any moisture through. And they can set these up and take these down very easily. But when they're set up, there are like more permanent structures, except in their time, they're not going to leave any trace behind it. So that's where sometimes it's difficult to find some of these smaller cities, depending on what kinds of structures they had. All right. So highlight Gath, and then down at the bottom, by the number 15, highlight Ziklag. Use your yellow one for that. We're going to put a blue circle around the Philistine cities. So do that around Gath. That'll be our reference point.
Gazer.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. So put one around. Yeah, I know. But we were just at Gath. So circle Gath.
Okay, it doesn't say to do that, you're saying.
I'm saying it does say it later.
Oh, got it.
I'm going to give you all 5 that are in the list, but I'm just going to go in a different order because of where we know we are. So if you go an inch and a half north of Gath, you see Ekron. Circle Ekron. All right, and then if you come, if you go straight west towards the coast, you'll see 2 Ashdods. You'll see an Ashdod Yam and an Ashdod Azotus. Circle the Ashdod Azotus, the one that's not right on the coast. All right. Go south from there, and you'll see Ashkelon. It's sticking out in the Mediterranean Sea. It's right on the coast. Circle that one. We were able to go to Ashkelon last time, and hopefully can do that again. And then if you go south from there, the next along the coast, you'll see the next city is Gaza.
We will not go to Gaza.
Thank you.
So this is the Gaza Strip that you hear about. That's where that's talking about. Okay.
Won't be visiting that area.
No.
Those 5 cities that we just circled, those are the primary Philistine cities.
Okay.
And so those are there. In blue white caps, right in an open area between Ashkelon and Gath, right in blue, in all caps, Philistines. So just in that open area on the plain.
They've
Yep.
already written it.
Have we already written that?
Oh, no, it's in the map.
Philistia.
They have the Philistine and Alluvia plain.
Yeah, so right around that, put Philistines
Just, all right.
in all caps.
And then Philistia.
Those are the areas of the Philistines, all right? And then in black, if you go just to the right of Ziklag, which we highlighted, so find Ziklag again, we highlighted that one. And then in black, so whether you use your pen or your black marker, put Philistine Sheriff in the Negev. And you can put it on top of each other, stacked is what, so Philistine, and then the next line Sheriff, and then in the Negev. All right. That's where David was keeping, according to the Philistines, they thought David was keeping the cities of Judah in line. What he really was doing was he was eliminating any threats to Judah when he was going out on these raids. And he would bring back the spoil and say it was from the people of Judah, when really it was from other peoples that were threatening the people of Judah.
So again, God took Saul chasing David to inform David of his later reign.
Yeah, so David knew this area, knew this was a border
Yeah.
area, but he also knew the politics of the Philistines too.
God's
Yeah.
personal.
Yeah. All right. We'll turn the page. So the discussion that's there on the 4,000-year overview, we've seen the weakening Egyptian involvement that's there. We're not going to spend some time on that. And the Canaanite centers that are there. Down about the 5th or 6th line, the Philistines wisely settled on the strategic points in the southern coastal plain, and especially around the fertile Philistine alluvial plain. From here, their 5 main cities could control trade passing between Egypt and Aram or Mesopotamia. Clearly, the Philistines of David's day were not enamored with the Israelites in the hill country, neither with the strong tribe of Ephraim with whom they had battled at Aphek, nor with the tribe of Judah whose territory in the Shephelah bordered some of their cities. There was an ongoing war with Saul, the leader of the Israelites, whose forces were keeping them out of the hills and had even made successful campaigns to defend the clans of Judah in the Negev. Something had to be done to control the emerging Israelites. Within this context, David finds refuge with the Philistines at Gath after his months of fleeing from Saul and is given a specific task as Ziklag by Achish, the king of Gath. What's the task? Trade caravans were seen in the Transjordan long before this time period, carrying precious goods from Arabia to various destinations, including ports on the Mediterranean. Some of this trade passed through the Negev, as finds at Tel Massos indicate. Its inhabitants appear to have benefited from this trade. Excavations have exposed larger buildings indicative of governmental or commercial use. Material finds point to non-Israelite population commercially linked with the coastal regions to the west. This settlement was destroyed in the decades before 1000 BC, perhaps in the southern campaign of Saul. So you're following that? In this area, there's already, at the time of Saul and David, an established trade route that's coming this way. And so that's what David is given there to try to control that. Continuing on page 52, early accounts of the Israelite settlements in the south include interesting episodes which represent more than a passing interest in the area. Caleb, Joshua's ally and close friend, received the area of Hebron, which included hill regions south of the city. He ensured settlement along one of the area's main routes by giving Debir to his daughter and her husband, Othniel. The Kenite clan moved with the people of Judah to the wilderness of Judah in the Negev of Arad. The tribes of Simeon and Judah attacked Zephath in the Negev and called it destruction. The tribe of Simeon settled in the central and western Negev. Even Samuel's sons, who cunningly chose to serve as judges at Beersheba, took advantage of what was happening. They not only sought income from the arid Negev's herders in the area's limited grain harvest, but knew that they could cash in on the Negev's growing trade network, especially since their father was known from Dan, way up here in the north, all the way down to Beersheba here in the south. All of this shows that the Israelite settlements were well established in the arid region of the Negev when David fled to Gath and was assigned to be a Philistine sheriff at Ziklag. As trade increased in the Negev, Israelite settlement also grew. This must have caused serious concern among the Philistines, since Negev trade routes reached Gaza, Ashkelon, and Gath, as can be seen on our map. It was in this context that Achish, king of Gath, gave refuge to a fugitive from Judah, even though that fugitive had early killed Goliath, Gath's hometown champion. David realized that staying at Gath was not in his best interest and asked to be transferred. He no doubt had kept his ears open and knew Achish's concerns about securing southern trade coming to Gath via the Negev. In what he thought to be an astute geopolitical move, Achish made his claim over the Negev by sending David and his band of fighting men to Ziklag to patrol the area and secure its trade routes. Achish, however, did not know the astute nature of David with whom he was dealing. You guys follow all that? The trade routes, the Gath, at one point, this happens politically, right? At one point, your arch enemy, David killed Goliath, Gath's champion, now becomes your ally or supposed ally. And political people have made those moves where they have to talk with and be friends with people that once they thought they would never do that. It happens today. It happened then too. It happened as we speak. If we think about Korea, right? North Korea.
Yeah.
But,
Remember the old saying, only Nixon could go to China, only David could go to Gath.
yeah, I mean, that kind of idea. And again, you had to have your eyes open because at any time, either could double cross. And David does, from the beginning, really, is doing that. All right. So we're going to highlight Hebron, Beersheba, and Arad. So if you trying to get the best way to get to Hebron. So if we follow,
Look where at En-Gedi.
En-Gedi, yeah, thanks, Tom.
And then go about 3 inches in, just slightly north of there, and you'll see Hebron right in the middle of the hill.
You got a green dot there.
We got a green dot already there?
Yeah.
All right, so highlight that one. There's Hebron. Thank you. And then we're going to go south from there, probably about 6 inches or so.
Oh, there's two. Which one?
They're going to be the Arid, the T-Arid.
Okay.
All right, highlight just the
Oh, it
Arid.
says right here, sorry.
Highlight Arid.
Oh, Arid.
Arid, yep.
You gotta find Beersheba too.
And then we're going to go straight west from Arid to
We don't have
Beersheba.
that yet.
So Beersheba, so if you're going to go south and east from Ziklag along that road that we highlighted earlier, you're gonna see Beersheba there. There's two Beersheba. We want the Beersheba, the one that's farther to the right. Let me just double check that. Yeah, yeah, the one that's farther to the right.
I didn't find it.
I'll help you out.
Because I was finding.
You found Beersheba, yeah? Eric's right there.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Anybody else need help? We're good? Okay.
There's a big city down there now. Beersheba.
Yeah.
Still called Beersheba.
All right. In small black caps, write Calebites. So this is where Caleb, if you remember Caleb and Joshua, the two spies, that gave a good report of the land. Caleb settled in the open area just above Hebron in elevation. So in Hebron, just in all capital letters, just above it, write Calebites. So Caleb's descendants lived there. And then go south to Arad, or Arad, however you say that, Arad. Write Kenites above the open area above Arad. The Kenites were a group of people that came with the Israelites from Egypt, and they settled with them. And then if you go back over to Beersheba, above Beersheba in all caps, write Simeon. This is Simeon's tribal area. He kind of gets absorbed, his people get absorbed into Judah at some point. All right, we all cut up there? All right, we're going to find these sites between the Negev and the Arab. I don't think it's asking us to highlight or do anything with them, is it?
I would just find them.
Just find them. So we're looking between, so Hebron up here in the north and the Negev down below. We're looking for Aurora. I don't have these highlights. This might be a little harder here.
It's right on
Yeah, it's down at the very bottom.
So south, at the very bottom, kind of between Arad and Beersheba, but down at the bottom. So that's there. Ramoth Negev is just north of that, about 2 inches. Jatir, straight north of that, kind of, there's no road by it, so out in the wilderness. And then Estemoa,
It's right, it's northeast, about an inch.
yeah, and then Hebron. And so if you run your finger from Hebron down through that, you can it kind of almost makes a line. This was inhabited. This is where the southern clans of Judah were related. So if you just in that area, write southern clans of Judah in green.
So like a swoop towards it.
Yeah, southern clans of Judah in green caps.
Where is that going?
Just kind of that, how we kind of ran those cities, just in that area. And then you, once we've got that in orange, or is it red? Orange caps, orange. So if you go to the scale, on the left side of the scale, below like the 0 mile mark, start the word Amalekites there in orange caps. So the very bottom of your map. Amalekites. And we're going to do a little bit of reading in 1 Samuel 27. So here's the cunning of David in 1 Samuel 27. Actually, can somebody read that for us, 8 through 12?
I got it.
Thanks, Tom.
Now David and his men went up and made raids upon the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. For these were the inhabitants of the land of old, as far as Shur on the land of Egypt. And David smote the land, and neither man nor woman alive, and left neither man nor woman alive, but took away the sheep, the oxen, the asses, the camels, and the garments, and came back to Achish. When Achish asked, "Against whom have you made a raid today?" David would say, "Against the Negab of Judah," or "against the Negab of Jerahmeelites," or "against the Negab of the Kenites." And David saved neither man nor woman alive to bring tidings to Gath, thinking lest they should tell about us and say, "So David has done." Such was his custom all the while he dwelt in the country of the Philistines. And Achish trusted David, thinking, "He has made himself utterly abhorred by his people Israel. Therefore he shall be my servant always."
My translation says an utter stench to his people. And that idea that, so David would go and he would come this way and he'd raid against these peoples outside of this that were on the border that were threatening his people and the Philistines, and he would kill them all. So he let none survive to take word back that what David was doing. And he'd bring the spoil back and he'd give it to Achish, the king of Gath. And so, where are you raiding? Well, I was over here. And I was killing and destroying the clans of Judah. And so Achish thought, oh, he's made himself an enemy of his people. He can't ever go home. He's my servant now forever. So David was politically astute. So at Ziklag, David had three perfect base of operations. Safe from Saul, but near Judah. He could also develop good relations, this is on page 53, with the clans in the Negev and in Hebron. The net result of his actions, which we are about to discuss, was that in less than a year and a half, Saul was dead, and David was asking for divine guidance. Should he return to Judah? After an affirmative answer, he asked for more specific directions. The answer shows how much had changed in that year and 4 months at Ziklag. The answer was emphatic: to Hebron. This changed Judah and Israel's history. From Ziklag, David conducted his activities with great cunning. He reported to Achish that he was busy raiding various Israelite communities in the Negev, but in reality, he and his militia were serving as a defensive force for the Kenites, Jerahmeelites, and Simonites by controlling desert bands from the great southern wilderness who raided settled populations in this fringe area. Saul had earlier delivered these communities from the Amalekite threat, which may have gained him the loyalty of the southern Judah. David was now presenting himself as their defender. As a common saying in the Middle East succinctly states, he was making friends before he needed them. Regions noted in this account reflect your marking on the SCA map. The Negev of Judah was the arid hill country south of Hebron. The Negev of Jerahmeel extended south beyond Aor on the southern border of the SCA map. The Negev of the Kenites was the area around Arad, where excavations have revealed an early Israelite settlement which existed before 1000 BC. We also have an interesting glimpse of Achish's thoughts at Gath as David continued to bluff him from Ziklag. David has made himself detestable to his people, Israel, and he will be my servant forever. What follows shows the extent to which this worked. As David and his militia were asked to join the forces of Achish and march north to challenge Saul and his forces in the Jezreel Valley, an area David probably had never seen. Note the setting of this battle on the NCA map you've already marked, Event 9. So if you remember that, I don't have that one on this one, but that was, this battle was over here at the Hill of Moreh. Yeah, that's where that was. So they came north through into the Jezreel Valley, and then that was where that took place on the Hill of Moreh.
And then they hung Saul on the walls
Of
Beersheba.
not
Beersheba.
Bethshan.
Bethshan.
Yep. All right. So, but David was asked to go with the Philistine army, and Achish asked him to go with them. But the other Philistine kings of the other cities said, "You may trust David, but we don't." And they left David behind for the battle because they thought that during the battle David would turn on them. So David was not in that final battle against Saul.
You gotta wonder what David was thinking when Achish says, by the way, we're gonna go attack Saul, would you go with me?
Yeah.
Because he's down there making friends among the southern clans, and now he's gonna have to go up there and kill Saul.
Or in fight against the northern clans and what's going on and what that means and what other people,
Yeah, but I
the
mean,
tribes, the
there's guys
northern
going
tribes
out,
weren't sure about this guy, I'm
How am
sure.
I gonna get out of this?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, God gave him a way out.
God gave him the way out,
Yeah.
didn't he? But for David, that had to have been another trust exercise in the Lord.
You wonder though, if David wouldn't have thought, well, okay, I'll go with them, but then when I get there, I'm gonna start fighting for their.
And that's exactly what the
That's
kings
what
of
the kings of Ashkelon, Ashdod.
They were-
That's exactly what they thought too. And so whether that's what David would have done, we don't know, because the Lord didn't have him be in that position. All right. So we're gonna highlight on our map here. We're gonna highlight Aphek Antipatris. So it's antipiece is what that means in Greek. Aphek is
Way up north.
very top of the map on the coastal plain side. Thanks, Tom.
Highlighted.
Highlight it
And circle.
and circle it in blue.
This explains why God would not let David build the temple though. All this bloodshed, you read that.
Yeah, he shut his hands.
Yeah.
In all
Yep.
these gyrations, he was in touch with God. This is God with David in his heart.
Yeah, and David continues to seem to have a great prayer life. If you look at many of the Psalms, some people have tried to say, well, David wrote this psalm when he was here. It's hard to do that. There are a few of them that say David wrote this psalm when he was here. And then those are the ones we know, but people are constantly trying to connect some of the other psalms to these events in David's life too.
That's a two-side. He's so interesting. One, he's a musician. He sings songs. He sings.
He's a Renaissance
And
man.
then he is one of the greatest killers.
Yeah.
Warriors that you
Yeah.
would ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, multifaceted king, isn't he? And then he becomes king. And we're gonna do a blue arrow from Lod toward Aphek. And so Lod is,
Lord was just south of Aphek.
yeah, so blue arrow toward from Lod to Aphek. And on that, next to the arrow, or right next to it, right, Philistine mobilization.
So do we start at Lod or?
Start at Lod
Okay.
and go north and draw the arrow to Aphek in blue. And right on the arrow in small black caps, Philistine mobilization. So the Philistines are gathering their forces from the south, and they're moving north towards the Carmel mountain range to cross over and then go into the Jezreel Valley.
That's gonna be their staging area.
Yep. Do a green arrow from Gibbethon to the end of the blue arrow. So Gibbethon's about 2 inches south of Lod.
Okay, that's green.
Green. And right next to that in black caps, David and his men. So David and his men go, they're part of that staging process, but they're left behind at Lod. You're not coming any farther with us, guys. A green arrow. And so that's just what we talked about. They're gathering their forces. They're getting ready to go. The Philistine, David's coming. He's going from Gibbethon to Lod. The other Canaanite kings, or the Philistine king said, we don't trust David. He's not marching with us. So they leave David behind. Kind of, you guard our southern flank here, and the rest of the Philistine army goes north and leaves them behind. That's what those verses are from 1 Samuel 28 and 29. So we're not going to look those up today, but that's what that account talks about. If you want to go back and reread those, you're welcome to. But that's what that account talks about, is they left David behind because they did not trust him. Achish did, but the others did not. So the Philistine campaign north along the International Coastal Highway, page at the bottom of 53 on the discussion, into the Jezreel Valley seems to represent a policy of protecting highways in the north, perhaps in response to the emergence of the Israelites under Saul. As Saul had mustered his forces to the Jezreel Valley to meet the Philistines, David found himself as part of a force which would be fighting against his own people, and thus would contradict the earlier respect he showed towards Israel's first king. David must have had mixed feelings as he marched toward to Aphek together with the army of Achish. What did his men think? Where had the bluff gotten him? Would he ever be able to return to Judah? The reader of the account also asked questions. Did David do the right thing in going to Achish? Why are there frequent statements of David's faith, which we read of earlier, missing here? Perhaps the answer is that David was reliant upon his own resources as his predicament became more complex. In spite of what he felt, David had to maintain an outward appearance of support for the Philistine cause. Otherwise, he could lose all. Aphek was the natural gathering point along the coastal highway for any force which would head north from the Philistine plain. It was here that the leaders of the Philistine cities mobilized their forces in preparation for the battle with Saul and his army. Many certainly recalled that it was near Aphek that an earlier Philistine army had overrun the Israelites at nearby Ebenezer, captured the Ark of the Lord, and later humbled and ravaged the tribe of Ephraim. That was when Eli's sons were killed, and the Ark of the Covenant was there, and Eli died. That was when Samuel was much younger. In this account, on page 54, an amusing conversation between David and Achish at Gath adds the finishing touches to David's long bluff. The other Philistine kings refused to allow David and his men to march north with them. David, pushing his bluff to the limit, demanded to know why. Achish soothingly replied, "Although you are as pleasing as God's messenger to me, please leave quietly." David and his men, together with the reader, breathed a sigh of relief as David turned south with his fighting force. We see in this story the same tactic which those who have lived in the Middle East know only too well. While David was at Aphek, the worst happened. The Amalekites, who no doubt had heard of events in the north, kept track of David's whereabouts and made a major raid on the Negev and on the southern hill country of Judah. They turned their fury on Ziklag, the city of their chief opponent. David's bluff had brought personal loss to his men who spoke of killing him. His future looked dark indeed. So David and his forces go north. The Amalekites attack Ziklag, David's base of operations. They're tired of him having all the victories, so they make a counterattack. And that's what happens. So we'll go to 1 Samuel 30, verses 1 through 6, and just read that account. Can somebody read that for us? So they're coming back home from this campaign. David's got to be thinking, what's going on up there with Saul? And David's men are coming home. So can somebody read verses 1 through 6 of 1 Samuel chapter 30?
David and his men reached Ziklag on the third day. Now the Amalekites had raided the Negev and Ziklag. They had attacked Ziklag and burned it, and had taken captive the women and all who were in it, both young and old. They killed none of them, but carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men came to Ziklag, they found it destroyed by fire, and their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. So David and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. David's 2 wives had been captured, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God.
All right, thank you. So we're going to get our orange marker out, and we're going to do sweeping arrows from the term Amalekite down by the bottom left of our map toward Beersheba Saba, or Tishaba, right? So just kind of a sweeping arrow. So we're kind of just going kind of right around the kind of just in an easterly way, going just slightly north to Beersheba. So they raided the Negev. And then from Beersheba, we're going to follow up and sweep that up to Ziklag. So a second orange arrow. And then from Ziklag, we're going to kind of complete the triangle shape. We're going to do a sweeping arrow back down to the Amalekites. All right, get your red marker out. Encircle Ziklag. So the Amalekites went over, they raided the Negev, they came up, they put Ziklag burned it, and then they took the people from Ziklag, all of David's men's family, and went back home. All right, in small black caps, write Amalekite attack on the first arrow, the one that was going kind of east towards Beersheba. Write Amalekite attack. And then on the one that goes from Ziklag back towards the Amalekites, on that arrow write Amalekites take spoil.
On the second one?
That's the third one,
last
the last one. Amalekites take spoil. They're taking it from Ziklag back home. And then you're going to do a green arrow. This is 24 on page 54. You're going to see T.L. Arini. So it's if you follow the highway south of Gath, you see T. Zita, and then the next one in parentheses is T.L. Arini. You're going to do a green arrow south from there to Ziklag. It's kind of the sweeping arrow from there to Ziklag. A green arrow.
What was the starting point?
So T.L. Arini, it's in parentheses about 2 inches south on the highway from Gath. And from there, just sweeping down to Ziklag. And then you're going to do another arrow. This kind of parallel to the one from the orange one from Ziklag down to the Amalekites. But just go only about 2/3 of the way on that one. Don't go all the way down. Because they intercept them en route. David catches up with them before they get home. All right. And so in small black caps, on the first green arrow that we just wrote, the one that starts at T.L. Arini, do David returns to Ziklag. And on the second one that goes the pursuit down towards the Amalekites, put David pursues. So if there had been TV in that day, the breaking news would have covered both fronts, right? The Amalekite attack on the south and the imminent showdown between Israelites and the Philistines in the north. All of Israel was waiting to hear what would happen and what it would mean for Israel's future. The catastrophe at Ziklag happening as it did while Saul was in the north, and all Israel anxiously waited. The latest news gave David an unparalleled opportunity to demonstrate his qualifications for kingship, politically and spiritually. Our reading above ended in a significant way. It states, David found strength in the Lord his God. A reminder that though this difficult period of surviving both Saul and the Philistines, David had not forgotten the lessons he had learned as a shepherd in the wilderness east of Bethlehem. He then called for the ephod, an action which leads us to compare this to Saul's decision to consult a medium at Endor. Right, so David's going to consult the Lord, where Saul consulted a medium in spirits. Right, twice David inquired of the Lord, and twice he was told pursue. David's pursuit of the Amalekites carried him beyond the Nahal Besor, the natural southern boundary of the country, and deep into northern Sinai. There he finally caught up with the Amalekites, dealing them a serious blow and recovering all the spoil from their raid in Judah, including the women and children. So they got their wives back. So we're not going to read that account, but that's what happens. They go, they attack, they get their wives out, they rescue them, and bring them back home. So the discussion there. David demonstrated justice in the division of the spoil with his men, and he showed himself politically astute in his commitment to the people of Judah and the Negev. The generosity exhibited by David upon his return was not, however, without an ulterior motive. He knew all too well that the strength of the Philistine force which he had left Aphek and went for Shunem in the north. Can somebody pick up reading for me there? My throat is getting really dry.
Where at?
Like the fourth line down.
Yeah, and realize that Saul's troops were no match for the Philistines. Saul would undoubtedly be captured or killed. At best, the future of Saul's Benjamin-based monarchy was questionable. Samuel had anointed David as king, and Jonathan, the crown prince, had sworn allegiance to David long before his death. It is clear that David knew his hour was at hand. Thus, there was all the more reason to cultivate friends in the influential region of Hebron and South Judah. The events recorded in the optional reading above confirm what David had been thinking while he was at Aphek, Ziklag, and throughout his lightning strike against the Amalekites. David had no cause to rejoice, either over his successful retaliatory campaign against the Amalekites or the prospect of becoming king of Israel. Jonathan, his friend, was also in the north with Saul. These must have been days of mixed emotion within David's sensitive spirit. David's recalled the songs of trust in God composed in the wilderness when he was a simple shepherd. You may want to skim 2 Samuel 1 to finish the sequence of events which brings Saul's reign to a close. Do not neglect to read David's lament in 2 Samuel 1:17 through 27. In it, David's inner feelings are exposed. No mention of his successes or possible future kingship is made. There in Philistia, his distressed spirit had to tolerate the Philistine joy of victory after this, their final triumph over the first king of Israel. David also recalled his relationship with Jonathan at Geba and how they had shared experiences of earlier battles with the Philistines, both at Michmash and in the valley of Elah. In his own way, each of them knew what Saul meant when he said, "Fix your heart on the Lord, worship him alone, and he will deliver you from the Philistines." This, more than any other thing, had drawn their spirits together in those decades before 1000 BC, which brought an end to the period of the judges and Philistine domination over Israel. Now, at Ziklag in southern Philistia, there was the news of Jonathan's death at the hands of the Philistines on the Mount of Gilboa. During these years of varied and unpredictable experiences, David had grown to manhood. At times, he no doubt questioned how his anointing by Samuel at Bethlehem would ever be realized. He was pursued by the recognized king of Israel, subject to the Philistines, his nation's archenemy, and exposed to his enemy by members of his own tribe, Judah. However, the events of this period in David's life, perhaps more than any other, proved his patience and complete trust in God. They also served to train a simple shepherd boy in the important regional and political realities of the country he was about to govern. It was this period of testing and training when David learned the dynamic of the Negev, the Shephelah, and the hill country, as well as the mentality of the Amalekites, Philistines, and even his own people, which best prepared him for his future place of leadership. Read 2 Samuel 23, 3 and 4 from his last words.
All right, I'll leave you to some of those things if you want to go back and read some of those things from Scripture. But that idea of God preparing him the whole time in the different places that were there. Any questions on that discussion? Thanks for taking up for me, Tom. My throat just got super dry there. Questions, comments on this part? All right. We're going to leave David behind for a little bit, and we're going to go to Misha. So we're going to kind of flip over. Misha is the Moabite king. So find Moab again in the bottom right of this map. So that's where Moab is, over here. And we're going much later. This is Misha. It's about 880 BC. Ahab was the king of northern Israel, Ahab and Jezebel. If you remember that with Elijah and the prophets of Baal, that was Ahab was the king during that time, and Jezebel. And so Ahab dies. And usually when a king dies, those that he has put in subject to him try to take advantage and rebel, throw off the yoke, while the new king is trying to consolidate power. And that's exactly what the king of Moab does. Remember, Ahab has pushed out here into the Medeba Plateau and has controlled this trade route, subjecting the king of Moab to himself. And so that's what's going on. So find the name Misha in the center of the chart, 880. We're not going to necessarily fine-tune that, but Misha is after David and after then Ahab in there. The small tablet to the right of the name signals an inscription. Here it represents the Moabite stone found near Dibon in 1868. It provides more details on Misha's rebellion against Ahab. His revolt corresponds with the transition from a period of strength, elevated A and J box, Ahab and Jehoshaphat, to a period of weakness for Israel, lowered HD box, where you have the heyday of Damascus. For more details, see the Israelite monarchies, the 500-year chart on page 39 of Regions on the Run. So our discussion. 2 decades before, 841 BC, were a rare period of cooperation between Israel and Judah. Alliances were sealed by marriages, and the kings of the two nations rode side by side in military campaigns. The two kingdoms each were able to expand into the Transjordan, so across here into the Ammonite territory and Moabite territory. Israel controlled Gilead and Moab, while Judah dominated Edom and the Red Sea port of Ezion-Geber, which is all the way down south of here. The rising power of Damascus, the Arameans, could not tolerate this situation in the Transjordan. Throughout the period, there is growing confrontation between Israel and Judah and Aram to the east and northeast of Beth-shan. The Arameans also appear with the Moabites and later with the Edomites in some biblical texts. It was in Damascus' interest to encourage rebellion in those areas. Anything that weakened Israel and Judah's control along the Transjordanian highway could only strengthen the position of Damascus and help it realize its expansionist policy. Assyrian campaigns in the region of Aram to the north shocked these competing local nations into forming alliances, which in 853 successfully halted Assyria in the Battle of Karkar. In the months that followed, local wars broke out again, ending in the death of Ahab, king of Israel. By 841, rebellions in Moab and Edom had successfully thrown off the yoke of Israel and Judah's domination. So that's talks about those things when Ahab dies and Misha rebels. That's what 2 Kings is talking about. All right, so the discussion, the bottom of 55. The first hint of Israel's move toward Moab and Transjordan is in 1 Kings 16. In his Ahab's day, Hiel of Bethel built Jericho. So the region of the run shows the importance of Jericho as a link from Moab to Bethel. So here's Jericho. We have that here. To get across into Moab, across Jericho is a principal area. And it sat empty and desolate since the time of Joshua in 1400 to 1200 BC, depending on which conquest date you look at. So it sat empty for 400 to 600 years, where this Jericho was not rebuilt because Joshua cursed it. Said this is not where we want to build a city. Ahab doesn't care, and he has somebody rebuild it. And so find the orange arrow, which sweeps from Samaria past Bethel and Jericho to the Medeba Plateau. We had that orange area earlier, right? We talked about that. So we had marked that earlier, that orange arrow from Jericho to the Medeba Plateau. That was Ahab when we put Israel on that.
I didn't do
I didn't do an orange arrow, we did down here.
Medeba Plateau?
No, we did that on the NCA map.
Oh, we'll do.
Is
Oh.
that where it goes to Medeba?
I'm sorry. On the NCA map. I'm sorry. Yeah. So we'll put one there in a little bit. So don't worry. Don't worry about it yet. We'll put one there in a little bit. All right. So on the NCA map. On the SCA map, note that the Jericho-Bethel route is part of a road between Aphek and the coastal plain. So have we highlighted that road?
Yes.
Jericho all the way to Aphek across the highlands.
On mine, I don't know.
No, we did not.
All right, we'll get there too.
Just
right.
FYI.
So we'll get there. All right. With the so basically there's a highway that ran this east-west route through there, and we'll highlight that here in a little bit. With central Benjamin and Judah's hands, this was the east-west trade route along Israel's southern flank. Other east-west links lay farther north on the NCA map. Wars between Damascus and Samaria, that's Israel's capital, sapped Israel's strength, and Misha of Moab knew that the time was ripe for rebellion. With the death of Ahab on the battlefield of Ramoth-Gilead on the NCA map, and no doubt with encouragements from Damascus after its victory, Misha made his move. Misha's inscription on the Moabite stone claims Ahab was living when Moabite's rebellion was in progress. It may depend on how one defines a rebellion. There must have been been rumblings before Ahab died, and the wars between Israel and Damascus would have encouraged Misha to promote his liberation movement openly. Ahab's death added fuel to the fire, and Moab launched an all-out campaign. The natural northern border of Moab was the deep Nahal Arnon. So the Nahal is kind of like a canyon or where a water develops, especially during the rain. So the Arnon Canyon, seen clearly on the SCA map. North of its small Dibon Plateau, it served as Moabite's forward position, a natural springboard for an advance onto the strategic Medeba Plateau with its intersection of trade routes along the Transjordanian Highway. The coveted Medeba Plateau had been a natural staging area for Israel's entry into Canaan and now could serve the same purpose for Moab. All right, so highlight on the Transjordanian highlight the Transjordanian highlight. Start south of Kir. I don't know where Kir is. Oh, I see it. So at the very bottom of the map, there's Kir in parentheses like Hareseth. Yeah.
Oh,
So don't go on that. Don't go where Kir is, but you see like where if you go all the way to the south of the map, you see where the road comes there.
Edom?
Yeah, start there.
Which
And-
one?
The north-south one.
To Edom, all right.
Start there and start drawing almost straight north.
Straight north?
You're
Yeah.
gonna go all the way up to Dibon.
So you're going to go to Kesser and all the way to Dibon. Highlight there.
And then on.
And then
up to-
keep going up to Medeba. So straight north again up to Medeba. And at Medeba, we're gonna take the there's kind of like there's an east-west road, and then there's like 3 that go to the north. We're gonna take the middle one.
So what city are you gonna go to?
So you see like Heshbon, Esbus.
Yeah, through Heshbon.
So Heshbon, and then Elah, and then the Abel Karim, and then we're going to cut to the right and go up towards Rabbah. And then we're going to go north from there off the map, straight north off the map.
That's the Transjordan.
Rabbah's almost off our map, so we're going to the right.
Oh, I see it, all right.
When you get to that, Abel Kiramim.
Take the right.
fork.
Yeah.
Got it,
Oh, right.
yeah.
Where
Yep.
it says, yeah.
Then back over to Rabbah.
To Rabbah, and then north and off the map. Rabbah is modern day Amman, Jordan. Yeah.
See that?
Yeah.
You should.
We should. We stayed in Amman last year.
You did. Really nice hotel.
Right.
Nicest hotel we stayed in.
So yeah, we're gonna highlight 2 different canyons. So down in the we're looking for the Arnon Canyon. So
Just south of Dibon.
yeah, I'm not sure where yours is. I don't know where yours is labeled on there.
Oh, I see it.
See Dibon, and then right down there is the Arnon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So highlight on the Arnon Canyon. Yep. That is the natural. That's what they said. That's the natural northern border of Moab. We were able to stop last time when we were in Jordan, and we kind of have a bridge as it goes over it, and you really see it's a natural dividing barrier. Pretty deep canyon.
Wide.
Oh,
It's right south
Oh,
of
yeah.
Dibon.
Let me help you find that there.
The Hamad Canyon?
It's, no, the Arnon, it's called the Arnon, and then parentheses is the
runs all the
Egypt
way
Canyon.
through there. So it's a very natural dividing line. Much like if you're coming, like how you're coming from St. Louis and you cross over 55 and you see the bluffs of the Merrimack, all right? That is a small bluff
Yeah.
compared to the Arnon Canyon. And it's like that on both sides and much, much, much higher.
Very
And it's
steep.
natural,
And
it's
it's
not
it's
dynamite.
natural, yeah.
It looks like the road through there is pretty curvy.
Yeah. Right, so that's the Arnon Canyon.
Oh, here's that.
And then we have to find the Mujib Canyon.
No, they're one. They're
Oh, that's the same one. So that's the same thing. Sorry, I'm like, I don't remember that one.
No, they're-
So that's
they're
the
same.
Arnon Canyon is the natural barrier of Moab, for good reason. And so when they pushed across at Dibon, they were able to gather their forces there. They gained a foothold on the other side of the canyon, and then from there they moved up to Medeba so that they could launch into Israel. Okay, highlight Jericho.
Oh, we missed, we
Oh,
we
did I
missed
miss?
Devon.
Highlight Dibon.
Okay. And then.
And in small black letters, write Misha's base by Dibon.
Dibon is right north of that canyon.
It's on that road that we highlighted.
Right, on the Transjordanian Highway. It's right north of the canyon.
Today that road is not quite as curvy as it goes down and through the canyon. We got a bridge over it and everything else. So yeah. but you can see the switchbacks that are on that going down if you look at that road. All right, now highlight Jericho, the northern non-italicized name. So you see two Jerichos?
Yes.
North of the Dead Sea on the left side of the Rift
So the
Valley.
one that is.
The one that's not italicized, the one farther north.
That's Old Testament Jericho.
Further north one. That's all right. There's two of them, the non-italicized farther north one. And then we're going to go basically west from there. And you see where Jerusalem is. You have Gibeah and Ramah. We have numbers by those. Mizpah, Elbira, and then you see Bethel and then Luz, right? So Bethel, highlight Bethel. So go north again from the Jerusalem, Gibeah, Ramah, Mizpah, Elbira, and then Bethel. You're just kind of going straight north. You run into all those cities. You have a red dot there already. Yeah. I can't remember what we've done and what we haven't done for my previous markings.
Okay,
There's Bethel.
got it.
All right, and then a blue box around the region named Moab. So way down in the bottom, and around Dibon, put a blue box around that as well. Moab and Dibon.
Oh.
We're going to push a couple minutes past if that's all right. I want to finish this event if we can. So,
Yeah.
Dibon.
By Mishah's base.
Mishah's base we just labeled. Yeah, put a blue box around that too. So the following is an excerpt from the Moabite stone. So this is something that archaeology has found. This is from this time period. And they found it that Misha put and wrote on this stone about his conquest, about his rebellion. And so this is something that's outside of the Bible that is in line or reinforces what the Bible says. Again, when we look at these things from an archaeologic perspective, we're not trying to prove the Bible, right? We believe the Bible is the Word of God, and by faith, when we see these things in archaeology, it just reinforces what the Bible says and helps us be even more confident that the pages of Scripture are true. We're not trying to prove the Bible correct or true. It's God's Word. It already is that. As Christians, we gain more confidence, and just it helps us be just assured that this is true when we see these things back up time and again from archaeology. So this is what's there. I am Misha, son of Shemosh, king of Moab. Omri, king of Israel, humbled Moab many years, and his son followed him. But I triumphed over him and over his house, while Israel perished forever. I rebuilt Baal-Meon, I rebuilt Kiriathaim. The king of Israel had built Ataroth, but I went against the town and took and slew all the people of the town. I brought back from there Ariel and dragged him before Chemosh in Kiriath. Chemosh is their god, by the way. Yeah. Chemosh said to me, "Go, take Nebo." So I went by night and fought against it, taking it and killing all. The king of Israel had built Jahaz and stationed himself there while fighting me. But I took warriors from Moab and set them against Jahaz and took it. I rebuilt Aror, and I made a highway in the Arnon. I rebuilt Bezer, for it lay in ruins, with 50 men of Dibon, and I rebuilt Medeba, Beth Debeleth, and Beth Baal Melon. All right, I butchered those names, but that's all right.
Okay, we don't know.
All right, so you can see the boast there, and this is, just it highlights, in the pages of Scripture gets, and Moab king, or Mesha, king of Moab, rebelled against Israel, defeating these towns, right? But he's doing much more flowery because he's the victor, right? So put a red city dot on all the city names printed in bold and reading above. So,
They're pretty easy. They follow the path up from Dibon.
yeah, so
Dibon.
we got,
I got that.
so I rebuilt Kiriathaim.
Kiriathaim.
That one,
Okay.
so if you go, everybody know where Medeba is? You find Medeba? So if you go north and east of Medeba is Kiriathaim. All right? All right. And I'm going to go a little out of order here, just since we're in that spot where Kiriathaim is. I'm going to give you a couple other ones that are mentioned there. If you go just north of there, you'll see Nebo. Mount Nebo is near there. That's where Moses looked into the promised land and the Lord buried him. And hopefully we'll be able to go there too. We did last time. All right. Medeba is one other one that we're going to highlight. So go back southeast from there to Medeba, right on the highway. So secure theme north to Nebo, down to Medeba. Then to the south and a little bit to the west, to the left of that highway, is Beth Bel Maon. So put a red dot on that city name. On the other side of that highway is the Imon Dibalatheum, or however you say that. That's the other city on the other side of the highway. You see that one there?
Yes.
You go a little farther to the right, and a little bit south, you'll see Jahaz with a question mark and some other fun stuff that's written by that. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but we'll put a red dot there. All right. And then we're not going to put a red dot on Dibon because he already had that, but go there. And if you go about an inch to the right and a little bit south, you'll see Aurora. All right. And then if you go the other way to the left of Dibon, to the west and just a little bit north, you'll get Kirioth. And just about almost straight north of there, you'll see Ataroth. All right, did I lose anybody? All right, great. We sound surprised tonight. We didn't. We sound shocked. You're doing great. We're doing great. So those are those. So these are these things, the cities that they retook from Israel and Judah, and that they had taken from them.
And that whole section you just read, that was on stone, that was on a stone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stone?
Big stone. It was on a big stone.
Like think monument.
Yeah.
Like so you go and you see one of these monuments and they've got a plaque of bronze or something on it and it lists or recounts it. Well, they didn't do it on metal, but they did it and carved it into the stone, and they found that.
And what they would do is they would put those up near the entrance of the city where that king lived, so that when people came in, they would read it and they'd think, wow, he was real great.
We do the same thing today with our statues and monuments and those
Yeah,
kinds
and
of
then we
things.
tear 'em down.
And then we tear them down later. And this one got torn down, but they found it. They found part of it. History repeats itself. There's nothing new under the sun. There really
They
isn't.
do that. They do that when we go to Dan. I know we're running late, but when we go to Dan, there's a similar one, and at Dan is the first extra biblical mention of David outside the Bible, and they found that at Dan.
That's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they hadn't, isn't that the first time
Yeah,
they
that
found
was
it?
the first time they
David
found his
was
name
named.
outside the Bible.
All right, so we're going to do some sweeping blue arrows. We're fine. Just want to keep us moving, so just trying to guard people's time as best we can. Sweeping blue arrows. We're going to do this. This is going to do Misha's moves. Okay, so we're going to go from that box where we have around the blue box around Moab. We're going to go there to Dibon. So just a sweeping arrow up, blue arrow up to Dibon.
Kind of near the road.
Yeah, near the road is great. That's what he would have done. In small black caps, write Misha on this arrow. So the difficulty there would have been crossing the Arnon in the elevations at the bottom of the gorge and along the northern side of Aurora. Misha listed his advance north across the Arnon Canyon among his accomplishments. He had to get the military to the other side and up. He'd been very vulnerable to attack and ambush there. From Dibon, along the route to Jahaz. So we're going Jahaz is the one that's almost off the map to the right.
It's all names.
All those names. So do a sweeping blue arrow up to that city dot from Dibon. And then we're going to do another arrow from Dibon north to Medeba. So along the route. All right. So Misha's moving, and now we're going to look at Israel's move to try to counter these things. All right. From Jericho via Nebo to the Medeba Plateau. So we're going to go from Jericho, an orange arrow that we're going to go right to the Medeba Plateau near Nebo.
Oh, I went all the way to
Go all the to Nebo and then beyond to the Medeba Plateau. farther right, it's in all caps. Did we have that one highlighted or not yet?
We got Nineveh Plateau.
Yes.
Had it highlighted. Yep, highlighted there.
All right.
All right, and then in small black caps on that arrow, write Israel. Trying to protect their interests, trying to protect their people, trying to protect their trade route. And then from just southeast of the Medeba Plateau, so again from the Medeba Plateau, from kind of down to Jahaz.
Not from Nineveh,
From so
but kind of, yeah.
so this is an orange one.
Orange one to Jahaz.
From Medeba to Jahaz. Place an orange circle around Jahaz. In small black caps, write Israel's base. Israel's base. So Mesa's campaign left a lasting impression on Israel and Judah. A century and a half later, the prophet Isaiah again lists some of the cities which Mesha had destroyed. Israel's list, however, heralds Moab's own impending destruction by the invading Assyrians. In contrast to Mesha's boastful statement of victory, Isaiah's lament has a sympathetic tone as Judah's distant relative, from whose midst King David descended, falls before the southern march of imperial armies. And this is from Isaiah 15. Ar in Moab is ruined. Kir in Moab, that'd be like Kiriath, right? Kiriathim, is ruined. One goes up to the temple of Dibon, to the high places to weep. Over Nebo and over Medeba, Moab howls. Heshbon and Elah cry out. As far as Jahaz, their voice is heard. Therefore the warriors of Moab shriek. Trembling seizes them. This section of Isaiah, it recounts all of Israel's neighbors and how they're falling to the Assyrian army. All right, we're going to end there for today. Event 16. Nice job. We got nice job on that. We'll go. We'll jump between a couple different maps next time. And then so we'll get into hopefully into even the Judah map next time as we get into the sixth movement here in the Judah map. So great job, everybody. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.